Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SPL Gauntlet. My name's Tom Dattinger, otherwise known as F-Dot, and I'm joined here by my buddies Anatoly and Dimmy. So you're used to me and Toly, but Dimmy might be a little bit new, so I'll let him introduce himself.
Pleasure to be here. I'm Dimmy, soloing for Energy Esports, and I'm here to talk about some high-caliber NA gameplay.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I caught that one. It's going to be a lot of fun today. As I said, this is the Gauntlet. We have our Masters, which is essentially our spring finals, a little bit later, but there's a couple more spots left, and that's exactly what we're doing here this weekend. We're going to figure out who winds up there at the Masters. But before we get there, we got some treats for you. Two promos going on this weekend. First of all, gentlemen chests. Right now we're all dressed up. Your characters can be at home as well. 25% off all of those gentlemen chest rolls. And of course, if you want to play with your friends, or I guess just solo as well, you get double XP, double worshippers, and a bunch of double favor as well. So all that fun stuff right down the middle.
And today we're going to be doing North America in the Gauntlet. Tomorrow will be Europe, and then Sunday, the most important day of all time, it's going to be the finals to determine which three teams is going to make the Masters.
Exactly. Dimmy's joining us here on the desk because he doesn't have to play until Sunday. But everybody else, they're battling it out today. North America specifically will be doing the business as far as we're concerned here. And that's how we're going to start things off. So it's a little bit complicated, so let's go right into it. Essentially what happens is teams will fight up the ladder. Oxygen Supremacy might be a newer name. That's one of the top teams from the Challenger Cup, and they're going to be challenging number 8 of the SPL, which is Flashpoint. The winner goes on to battle the 7th seed Noble, then the 6th seed Team Allegiance, etc., etc. On Saturday, we'll see the same thing go on as far as Europe is concerned. Sanguine, they struggled throughout the season, so they wound up at number 8. And then we take it on Optimus Gang. The winner then goes on ahead and fights against Shadow Nightmare and Lion Guard Esports and Elevate, etc., etc. Then finally, we come back on to Sunday, and as I said, this is where Dimmy plays. Energy is going to be up on top there, fighting against whoever winds up on the top of the European Gauntlet, and then E United will take on the winner of the North American Gauntlet. But this is where it gets fun. Then the loser finals and the winner finals, they're trying to get to Masters.
And that's the most exciting set of all time, because all these games that you're going to see today and tomorrow are all best of 3 up until that wild card, which is going to be that important best of 1 match. North America versus Europe in a best of 1. Dimmy, how do you think that's going to transition in that matchup?
I think it's going to be really good to watch. I think best of 3 is amazing because it kind of eliminates the cheese strats. I want to see really long games, and this matchup especially, I want to see not a shutout, like no 2-0.
I think that should be a lot of fun. What I'm really most excited for here is we have 14 teams in the studio. It's crazy. You're going to catch a lot. Make sure you keep up to date on Twitter at SmitePro, of course, everybody's personals. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff all across social media. 14 teams, and only 3 are going to make it to the Masters land in just a couple of weeks. So a lot of competition here today. And as we said, Friday, that's going to be our North American day. And that's today. Starting off with the Challenger Cup team, Oxygen Supremacy. They're going to be going up against Flashpoint, the number 8 team from North America. Now, Oxygen Supremacy, these guys look pretty good. They were formerly known as the SPL Gatekeepers before they got caught up with an organization. And this is Kiki's team. We've seen him in and out of the SPL for a long time.
Yes, both Kiki and Skeeledon, formerly on Envia's Venenu, in that mid-role, playing in Allegiance before. So they have some experience playing the SPL. You know, coming from the Challenger circuit is not an easy task to be able to challenge the number 8 seeded team in North America, then try to climb that ladder, which is so long.
A lot of personality on this squad. Kiki and NeiruMah, some of the 2 perennial members, despite the fact that the other guys might be a little bit more popular. Venenu obviously had some time in the SPL, Skeeledon as well. And DayToRemeber, although he has not been an SPL player so far, he has been very, very fantastic throughout the AVGL and the Challenger Cup. But right there, that's Venenu. Came in his rookie season playing Hunter, now shifting over to mid. He's going to see if he can help his team find its way through the Gauntlet.
And normally in the Hunter position before that he used to play, it's not something that you're used to switching between Hunter and mid. Normally, Hunters will switch to solo or vice versa. So to see a player like Venenu switch into that mid position is interesting to see. But he's going to be up against Incon up in Flashpoint, someone else that was also transitioning from a different role, formerly a support player.
Well, once upon a time, Incon was the mid laner going way back in time. And so there is a little bit of that to lean on. But I think this is a much different world. Dimmy, you played for a long time. How much different is the game here in Season 4 than looking back to Season 1?
The game has changed a lot, obviously. We've gone to a couple of map changes. Personally, the game is sped up. Everyone knows what they're doing now. Season 1 was a bit wonky. Everyone's walking around. They don't know what they're doing. But Season 4, you have all these fantastic players that know exactly what they're doing. And you have this refined meta game now where you have a bit of early game. And you can snowball, or you either control the game and you go into the late game. And I want to see what these teams are doing, if they want to take the game quick or just take it slow.
Yeah, Incon right here prioritizes a lot of the Zeus, a lot of those early game push characters, and can definitely control a big area. So expect Incon to really lay it down with big burst mages like that.
It's definitely time to throw everything and the kitchen sink at your opposition. There's no time to hold strategies against your opposition. And the captain of Flashpoint, Shadowq here, he's going to be leading his team into victory.
Yeah, Shadowq definitely one of the longer-term players here in the SPL. Now playing for Flashpoint. Once upon a time was on what I consider to be the first true dynasty of Smite Esports, which our own Anatoly was on that Dignitas roster once upon a time with the likes of Lazes and Zapman. It's been a number of years since then, but Shadowq certainly poised and ready to take his team to the top once more.
I'm Shadowq. I'm a pro player for Flashpoint.
So Shadowq is a pro player for Flashpoint. Excellent deep info right there we have from our support. On a serious note, we'll get back to that a little bit, but Shadowq, I've known him for a number of years, and I can delve a little bit in this even without the visual aid. Shadowq is one of these cerebral players. Dimmy, you're a longtime player. You know what it's like to play with people like Raffer, that the game just sort of comes to them. But then there are those players that really dig deep and bop hard and go into the stats and stuff like that. What does that value add to a team?
Obviously, you kind of know the game at a deeper level. If you do all the math, you know exactly what you're doing. Some pros, they prefer to kind of have the feeling of how it feels. You say, okay, this item is good because it feels good, right, not because you really did the math. Raffer's more of these kind of people. You have other people like Emilzy, which just love to do the math. Shadowq is a math person, and I think it's really valuable.
I think it creates an interesting dynamic as well. You have Xenotronics, who is kind of half and half. He does the homework, but he lets the game come to him. Shadowq is going to be really deep in that sort of meta. And then you have players like Aquarius, who let the game come to them. Aquarius, one of the newer players here in the solo lane. This should be some spicy stuff. I'm expecting some interesting things, specifically over there in the solo lane. So let's get right into it. It's Oxygen Supremacy, the Challenger Cup team, taking on Flashpoint Esports, number 8.
Like you're talking about Aquarius before, he used to be on the same team as DayToRemeber back in the day in Most Wanted Esports in the previous season, but now up until he got picked up by Flashpoint, this is going to be to see the kind of maybe a rivalry between these two players potentially.
Oxygen Supremacy, I think, came out and really surprised a lot of people. That a lot of times when we go live with the SPL, we have the remainder of the Challenger Cup on the host, and people start watching them and go, who are these players? What's going on? I know Kiki, I know Skeeledon, but NeiruMah, I've heard his name here and there. These guys aren't nobodies by any stretch of the imagination, and I think the people that are a little bit uninformed about OS are going to be pleasantly surprised by the level of competition that we're going to catch here today. Cabrakan, the first ban, this has become rather standard.
Not necessarily for myself. This is more of a ban I've been recognizing in the NA scene. They love to take away the Cabrakan fairly early on. Shanga present in the jungle, also good to see. For me, it's important to see what do we have in the game here, who's going to have the early game, who's going to have the late game draft. Both NA teams, I'd say, would go for the early game draft because that's what we like to do in this region. Yeah, just important to look out for that.
And Cabrakan's one of these picks where you can flex it in 3 different positions. Yeah. Support, jungle, soul lane. It's not a bad idea that if you don't necessarily want to play it, you take it away from your opposition. On top of this, now you don't have to worry about these walls and the obnoxious tremors at level 1. So you can run some of these immobile mid-mages, such as Ra, potentially.
Chang'e, similar character with a lot of ambiguity. I'd say 2.5 roles. Chang'e can play mid and jungle, surprisingly enough, very, very strongly. Solo, she can dance, but not really her game, so to speak. Chang'e, Zeus, Scotty, and Cabrakan off the board. Ain't nobody picking those characters today. So the first selection will be Medusa. This is a nice, this character really reaches her prime, I think, in the mid-game, ability-based hunter, a lot of team fight control.
Definitely a targeted pick to take that away from Xenotronics because he's been playing Medusa at a really high level. And not only that, he's been playing very aggressive on this god.
So last year, we actually saw Xenotronics play middle lane for Luminosity Gaming and he played a high-level Medusa when she wasn't even considered a quote-unquote meta pick then. Now that he's in the hunter role and she's top of the crop, that's a little bit scary. So Oxygen is going to take her next to the Hun Batz along with the Fafnir.
I really like the Osiris coming out from Flashpoint. I've been talking to Aquarius a bit prior to the game, and he's been telling me he wants to keep the pace a bit slower, actually go for more late game gods, but it feels like on the roster of Flashpoint, he wants to go for more early aggression because he seems to be the one that needs to carry the game for him. So Osiris is clearly the god for the early aggression, and I really like that pick on him.
Yeah, Osiris has been a long-time bully, a lot of slows, a lot of situational tools there in the god's kit. And then Poseidon, this is one of the more cut-and-dry gods in Smite. Hun Batz becomes a little bit about counter-initiation and a little bit kind of more complex. Poseidon, you're just cracking somebody in the brain, really, and look for that burst.
You have a lot of burst potential, especially to follow up off of the Wrath of Terror from the Sylvanus. So always sticking hand in hand between the jungle, support, and mid. The question is, what's going to be the final piece of the puzzle for Flashpoint? They have their support and their mid. Now, with Thorban off the table, they need another setup god, potentially, to make sure the Krakens are always going to hit.
This is very interesting to me, seeing the bans come out for Flashpoint here, because Hun Batz is already selected for Oxygen Supremacy, and Flashpoint goes on to ban 2 more assassins, Susano and Thor, traditionally junglers. So Flashpoint right here, are they anticipating Hun Batz to be in the solo lane, or are they anticipating an assassin choice for the solo?
It's interesting to see. Normally, you don't really play a lot of assassins in the solo lane, at least in Season 4 days, because of the delayed time in the jungle. You don't really have time to invade buffs and time to do double buffs if you wanted to. There's not too much leeway in terms of what you want to do. So to ban away these 2 assassins when the Hun Batz was already dictated means that Flashpoint might be potentially thinking that there could be an assassin in that solo.
Which is what I'm thinking. Kiki has been cheeky. Kiki's always been very, very interesting when it comes to his picks. And I think that that might be something that Flashpoint have a little bit of history, knowing that Kiki is going to bring something fancy into the solo lane. But instead, he goes to the Old Faithful, one of the most quintessential solo laners of all time, Vamana. What exactly does the baby bring to lane, Dimmy?
He brings easy lane clear. It's a very good wave clear. He can dominate the lane in a matchup where the opposition is a bit weaker. Osiris should be beating out the Vamana in the early stages. In the team fight, he doesn't really do much. He just walks around and slows people. Osiris does the same, and I think Osiris should be taking that matchup, though.
It's like a double-edged sword here, Vamana versus Osiris, because on one hand, yeah, Vamana will outclear the Osiris later stages of the laning phase, but on the other hand, the Vamana was picked after the Osiris. It seems that Kiki kind of counterpicked himself because of the ultimate, making sure that there's going to be no healing. So as long as Aquarius can hit that Lord of the Afterlife onto Kiki, he's going to be having a rough day.
I'm surrounded by 2 solo laners. I want you both to touch on this. Why would you, because we see this kind of often, why would you counter pick yourself? There's got to be something different there.
This is a classic matchup of 2 sort of aggressive lane warriors, and the way this is going to play out, whatever warrior is going to get ahead can just take charge of the laning phase and just completely steamroll. So I guess what Kiki wants to do here is just maybe get an early pick on Osiris and then just dominate from there.
Captain Shadowq putting down the notes. Awilix will round out the draft after Artemis right there. A hunter that, I mean, I saw a post today saying that Artemis was not a viable character. And yet here she is, ready to bring out those crits. So a little bit of early game, like you said, with the Osiris, and the late game coming out with the Artemis.
Artemis is one of these guys that needs a lot of protections and peels to be able to survive in the mid to late game, making sure that whenever she gets dove by that big baby. Now the question is, if we see Aquarius dive that backline and Sylvanus initiate, who's going to protect this Artemis?
There won't be much peel for the Artemis in this team comp, and I'm actually kind of sad to see that, because if they just decide to focus on the Artemis, then that early game team comp is not going to have much damage to deal with the rest of them.
Vulcan finishes it off real quick, 1 word each. Flashpoint, Oxygen, Supremacy. Based on the draft, Dimmy, who wins?
I'm giving it to Flashpoint.
I actually got to give it to Oxygen here.
So it looks like a split down the middle. We've got 2 friends on the call. It's going to be Aggro and Taco bringing us the business.
Thank you, F-Dot. We're ready to go. It's been so long, Taco, since we've been able to cast some SPL level Smite. And I just can't wait. I'm so excited about this matchup.
I feel the same way as you, Agra. I'm absolutely excited to see how Incon and Kiki are really going to face off in this matchup to see who is going to be battling it out for the rest of the weekend.
They were teammates for a long, long time on Team Envious, now on opposite sides of the LAN center here. And taking a look at these drafts, I mean, they were talking about the Osiris in the early game for Flashpoint, but then you check down the list, it's Sylvanus, Poseidon, Awilix. That's a lot of early game for Flashpoint. And then they're giving Xenotronics this Artemis as their late game fail-safe in case things don't go well in that early stages.
Not to mention that Poseidon and Awilix is just an incredibly difficult combination to escape, and there's not a ton of mobility on the side of Exogen Supremacy once you get involved in those cripples of the Whirlpool.
Exactly, and if Batz does manage to jump away, or Fafnir, then Gravity Surge is likely going to be waiting for them to pull them right back in. And Mirage for Flashpoint, I think he's one of the junglers for North America that seems to slide a little bit under the radar here, but I like this aggressive pick for him. It seems to synergize well with what he likes to do.
I mean, we've seen it from Flashpoint plenty of times before. Aggression is certainly a playstyle that they are very familiar with, and probably something that they feel a little bit more comfortable with as well. So giving Mirage a pick like Awilix that he can immediately try and put as much pressure early on, it's absolutely phenomenal.
And this is what Flashpoint wants to do, is get pressure on that right-hand side, potentially in that middle lane as well. Shadowq on the Sylvanus. Sylvanus, one of the highest win rate Guardians that we've seen throughout this spring split, and it's about that early game pressure and of course the sustain. Oxygen Supremacy has no sustain on their side, and Flashpoint, they've got that Sylvanus.
Not to mention Sylvanus and Artemis, that's the perfect pairing because you want something that's going to be able to protect that Artemis as much as possible. Well, that's exactly what they have.
Right away, a two-man grouping, but it's Shadowq, the support in the mid lane with Incon, the support player for Oxygen. He's on that left-hand side, NeiruMah laning up with DayToRemeber. These are two guys that have been around the challenger scene for quite some time, and both, I think, are reaching a higher level of play than they ever have before.
Skeeledon already taking so much poke, though, in that middle lane, and the speed buff, that's probably going to go the way of Flashpoint already.
And this is the problem you can have with Vulcan in that mid lane, is that his mid to late game damage is in the same conversation as Scylla. I mean, it's just insane how much safe damage Vulcan can put out in the late stages, but it can be difficult for him to get there. Oxygen knows this is the case, and instead is contesting on that right-hand side, give up both buffs and secure their own red. Xenotronics forced to beads, but he steals away the purple, getting a little bit of XP for himself. Is that worth the beads cooldown to steal away the purple?
That's 100% worth the cooldown, because now Xeno can just play this lane as passively as he wants to, and if he's struggling, then Shadowq can just make that rotation to help him clear the way. But the fact that he was able to secure his own buff there, that's absolutely perfect.
And exactly what you see, Shadowq heading on over to that left-hand side. Right side buffs have been cleaned up by both Mirage and Aquarius. Aquarius played a lot of Guardians during the spring split, Taco. This is definitely a different look for him, but I like this idea. You heard Dimmy talking about it on the desk, just getting a little bit more pressure in that lane than the typical, you know, Terra solo that we saw him play so often.
Aquarius I really like the way that he's trying to adapt up his playstyle to what his team is looking for. They wanted early aggression, and that's exactly what you're going to find with an Osiris.
Especially when you've got an Awilix on your side and the Sylvanus and Poseidon too. Why not? Right now it's basically even, and that's exactly what Oxygen Supremacy wants at this stage in the game, where we've talked so much about Flashpoint's pressure. There's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of Oxygen. It really should be only in that dual lane side with DayToRemeber on this Medusa that they expect to get any sort of lane pressure.
But the nice thing for Flashpoint is, since Xenotronics was able to secure his own purple buff, he has the timer on that, which means that for any time that buff is spawning, Shadowq and Incon can easily make the rotations to help Xeno ensure that he's securing that experience for himself.
Are you surprised that we don't see NeiruMah hang out a little bit more on this left side to maybe zone Xenotronics away without the purification beads, or do you like his decision to allow DayToRemeber to get some solo farm?
Considering that Shadowq loves Xenotronics alone in the lane to solo farm, it's probably a little bit better for DayToRemeber to acquire the same kind of farm. But Skeeledon looks like he might have other plans.
And Xeno, again, doesn't have those beats for their 45 seconds. No ultimate available either. DayToRemeber playing aggressive, and there goes Xeno. Skeeledon picks up kill number 1 of the spring gauntlet in that duo lane. A clean first blood for Oxygen Supremacy.
Absolutely beautiful gank by Skeeledon. Recognized that the ward just wasn't available, and with Xeno being pushed that far up the lane anyway, even with as minimal mana as possible, Skeeledon getting that kill, that's exactly what you want.
Especially as a Batz. I mean, Batz not this early game pressure god like, say, an Awilix on the side of Mirage, but if you can get an early lead on Batz, I don't think he's really discussed in terms of late game hyper carries out of the jungle, but he can absolutely put out that level of damage.
It's not even the early lead on Skeeledon, though. If you take a look at DayToRemeber's level, he's level 6. Xeno just hit 5. So Medusa is already having the upper hand in this duo lane, and as long as DayToRemeber plays this lane out smart, he's going to have an advantage the entire time over Xeno until the later stages.
Plus, getting Skeeledon an extra level at this stage, you mentioned the level that DayToRemeber has, but there was a speed buff invade, and this allows Skeeledon to maybe try and secure it himself. Almost knocked up there was Kiki, but not quite the backside for that Moonlet charge. But Aquarius still pressuring down the solo laner. Skeeledon does secure his own speed buff, but the 3-man grouping around the blue signals to me that Flashpoint is getting at least one enemy buff.
Just in the nick of time. Had he stayed any longer, that could have potentially been Skeely taking a spill himself.
I mean, Kiki, we talked about it on the desk. This is him counterpicking himself in a way, just allowing himself to get pressured out on this right-hand side, which is definitely a testament to his confidence level about he can sit underneath the tower, he can not worry about the early stages of the game, even on a character that's usually so focused on that part of the game as Vamana.
At this stage in time as well, Oxygen recognized that their early game isn't nearly as intimidating as that of Flashpoint's, so if they just play a little bit back, forfeit some of the earlier buffs, and then wait this out, they'll have more than enough opportunity to try and capitalize on the little mistakes that Flashpoint might make.
Well, Flashpoint's not trying to make any mistakes on this right-hand side. Kiki's not healing anymore, thanks to Lord of the Afterlife. Flashpoint needs one more, and Aquarius puts him on the board 1-1 in that solo lane.
And that's the aggression that we wanted to see out of Aquarius on this Osiris and the pure intention behind the pick. Kiki, you can play as passive as you want, but there's not much you can do getting dove for that much damage underneath your tower.
I mean, there's very clear focus from both teams. Flashpoint clearly focusing on Kiki in that solo, and I'm not sure it's so much about focusing Kiki, but focusing on Aquarius, trying to get him ahead in that lane. Oxygen, they're on the other side of the map, continued focus on the Xenotronics on this late game carry. Do you think that this is a matter of, can Aquarius get enough ahead to boost Xenotronics through this rough laning phase? Or would you rather see Flashpoint try and help out their ADC?
I kind of like the mindset to just boost Aquarius at this point in time, because even as an Artemis, it doesn't matter how far behind you fall. If Aquarius can buy his team enough time to get through the rougher stages like you mentioned, then Xenotronics is going to have zero issues whatsoever gas pedaling later on.
And despite this heavy focus on the left-hand side, Xeno's only down about 300 gold right now. That's not too big of a worry. Vamana, he's also down around 300 gold. So it's both teams are doing what they want to do. Both game plans seem to be working out. The solo laner for Flashpoint's ahead. The ADC for Oxygen is ahead. Just a matter of who trusts who to really carry it in the late game. By the way, they're focusing this left-hand side. Skeeledon coming around the backside once more. Xenotronics has the purification beads, but instead use that Caledonian boar. Xeno gets crit there by Skeeledon, and DayToRemeber is able to clean him up. Both kills onto this Artemis for Flashpoint.
And that's the interesting part when it comes to two gods who actually have the crit passes, but Batz came out a little bit sooner than Xeno's, considering that he was just on the retreat.
At 7 minutes, 216 off one auto attack is so much of your health bar, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Though in that sense, Skeeledon puts himself in a position to get lucky with a well-timed 3 and a good teleport, even underneath that tower. Does have to use his purification beads in that instance, and maybe we could see Shadowq and Incon try and put some aggression onto him as a result. Aquarius wrapping around the backside, looking for Venenu, who's 2 levels down. The soul laner can't quite hit him with that Lord of the Afterlife. The Kraken gonna miss thanks to the purification beads, but Venenu still gonna fall to Aquarius. Skeeledon jumps away from that gravity surge. Huge ult out of Shadowq. Mirage finds one, Shadow with the other. NeiruMah forced to jump away, and Flashpoint finds 3 in the enemy jungle.
And that is just such an unfortunate engagement for Oxygen to try and take up. Skeely didn't have his ultimate available. He'd expended it ganking Xenotronics, and because of that, Flashpoint just immediate grouping on those elementals, seized on the moment. Venenu too far outside of his lane, and there's just nowhere for that team to go.
All of the action has been in the side lanes so far. That was the first engagement we saw in mid, and it went handily in Flashpoint's favor. I think that's why we saw Oxygen not want to fight in that mid lane. Flashpoint not done yet. They want to go for this Gold Fury. Kiki teleports in, but the Gold Fury getting low. Flashpoint secure the Gold Fury. Kiki now in a little bit of trouble, forced to get up into that Colossal Fury, but DayToRemeber around the back, knocked up, forced to use his purification beads. Shadowq going to be able to escape with the help of Mirage. Flashpoint get the tier 1 tower and the Gold Fury and push their lead just above 2,000 gold.
And this could be a little bit risky for Oxygen to try and siege this T1 tower. You can tell that they want it, but DayToRemeber is really low on mana, and NeiruMah is already almost a half health.
Skeeledon's trying to steal away the enemy's speed, and he will do so successfully. Oxygen just kind of posturing there in the mid lane to create space for Skeeledon to snag away the enemy buff. So it's not all bad news. If you're an Oxygen Supremacy fan, the Challenger Cup challengers, really. I mean, there's no other word for it. You gotta come up and beat the number 8 seed Flashpoint, who I know a lot of the fans at home may say, oh man, 8 seed Flashpoint, big scary. But they really started to look a lot better towards the end of this split and really started to look like a more cohesive unit.
Not to mention that Flashpoint has had the opportunity to keep playing against these SPL teams for an entire split. And while Oxygen can be at the top of their food chain for the challengers, it's not necessarily the same story, trying to bridge the gap between the SPL and the Challenger League.
And even when you have SPL caliber players like Skeeledon, like Venenu, like Kiki, who have been there for so long, Kiki in particular has played in the SPL for years at this stage, even just that little break where you're playing against the Challenger Cup teams and then you have to try and reach back up there, it can be difficult, and you kind of forget the level of play that some of these teams are continuing to improve to.
Speaking of difficult, Kiki's still having a pretty difficult time in this solo lane matchup against Aquarius. Just absolutely brutal from Aquarius, pushing him underneath the tower consistently.
So we didn't see Osiris for almost, over half of the spring split. Then Maniac comes out and looks like a world beater with him. What changed to allow Osiris to really thrive in this solo lane?
Really just the buff. His buff just allowed him to exert so much more pressure into these solo lane matchups, and it's just absolutely crucial to a lot of these teams that are looking for early aggression.
Fear no evil onto Skeeledon, and he steals away the Portal Demon and jumps out of that Kraken, but it might be trouble for Venenu on Aquarius right on top of him as he was earlier on. Mirage still pushing forward. Meditation used there by NeiruMah to try and save the life of his mid laner, but again, Shadowq finds 2 with the knockup. Aquarius cleans up Ven by his back harpies, and everyone else is going to be able to jump away. Objective goes the way of Oxygen Supremacy, but again, Venenu falls to the hand of Aquarius.
And I'm not sure that's exactly the trade that Oxygen want to be taking at this point in time, considering that Venenu is already starting to fall a little bit behind Incon, considering when you look at the gold especially, they're having a little bit of itemization difficulty because Venenu doesn't really have a whole lot of protection, unlike Incon with that Dynasty Plate Helm. And he's just been getting face tanked the entire time by Osiris. Yeah,
pretty aggressive build coming out of Venenu, not electing to go for any sort of physical protection like we see Incon going for, like you mentioned, with that Dynasty Plate Helm. And you could really use it at this stage. Aquarius has been making his life hell, basically. Anytime Venenu's on the map, Aquarius is looking to chase him down. That's exactly what Osiris likes to do. Xenotronics still being pushed pretty heavily on this left-hand side, though. DayToRemeber has extended that experience lead up to 2 levels. He's got his second relic ready to go, and 28 stacks on that Transcendence. Xenotronics, he's just finished that Transcendence.
Another thing to note as well, going back to the Osiris though, is that when you look at Oxygen, who's going to be the peeling factor from the Osiris? They don't have a ton of peel outside of the Fafnir.
I mean, the guys on the desk talked about who's going to peel for Xenotronics, but you're right. Who is going to peel for Venenu? NeiruMah's got some decent, he's got a good stun and an AoE slow whenever he hits that stun, but that's about it in terms of hard CC. The disarm may help buy Venenu a couple moments, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to save his life. And this is just decided choice by Flashpoint to stick on this right-hand side and help out Aquarius, as matched by the exact same stubbornness of Oxygen Supremacy, who's looking to dive Xenotronics once more.
It's basically just going to fall a lot on DayToRemeber. And speaking of fall, NeiruMah barely escaping the ultimate from Mirage.
Yeah, and the Gravity Surge couldn't quite pull in the support that time, but it's still 4 members here up against 2. Venenu, he's in the mid lane pushing down that tower, so Flashpoint knows they need to get at least 500 gold in their favor, but they don't have an ADC here, Taco. It's going to take them a little bit of time. Tier 1 tower on the left side falls to Skeeledon and DayToRemeber. Xenotronic is holding on as much as he can. The blink, fear no evil. There's the ultimate out of Xeno to give him that CC immunity. Teleport coming in from Aquarius, but DayToRemeber and Skeeledon, they have already dipped. They got that Tier 1 tower and ran away with it.
Well, they can't be too careful in that jungle. It looked like Aquarius might have thought about giving chase for a second, but DayToRemeber and Skeeledon not trying to take any chance of the lazy back.
And Xeno not only used his ultimate, but his beads there as well. Skeeledon only had to invest his blink and ult. DayToRemeber the same with that Petrify, though. If you've listened to our cast before, you know if you can trade your ultimate for a defensive relic like Purification Beads or Aegis, it's worth it just about every time. Gold Fury started up here by Flashpoint. They're looking to secure this with the Kraken, most likely. Teleport coming in, NeiruMah in a bad spot, locked in that whirlpool, and Incon gets himself on the board with his first kill. DayToRemeber running from Aquarius, who has just been tearing through the backline of Oxygen Supremacy so far today, but only 4 members here from Oxygen trying to defend this Gold Fury.
That player damage from Aquarius right now is absolutely disgusting, by the way. 9.2k damage 14 minutes into the game, the next highest being Mirage with 4.1. That's insane.
Skeeledon is trying to wait for his ultimate to come up. It's almost ready to go, but not quite. Kiki focused out by Aquarius, stunned as well. There's the Lord of the Afterlife, but it misses. Kiki's going to be able to get some heals in that Colossal Fury, though he does use those Thorns as well. Flashpoint had a 5-on-4 power play, but not enough to secure the objective with it. Xeno walked to the wrong spot. There's the Fear No Evil. Skeeledon forced to use his Purification Beads. Aquarius zoning 4 members all by himself right now, but no one from Oxygen is getting low enough.
But the issue here is that Shadowq Sylvanus, he's got the sustain. Flashpoint are immediately just going to try and draw back the fight once again onto this Gold Fury. And I'm not sure that Oxygen are going to be able to contest much longer.
DayToRemeber, he's backing, as did Venenu, but Flashpoint decide not to pull the objective. They definitely had the advantage in terms of ultimate still available, Taco. But Incon was very low on mana, and that Whirlpool Kraken combination takes quite a bit out of your mana pool in order to execute.
I like the safe play there to just opt for the Oracle Vision, because now they have that freedom to decide to pressure that objective whenever they want to. Plus, Xeno gets a little bit of vision.
And that's exactly what he's been needing on that left side. We're 15 minutes in right now. Flashpoint up on their Challenger Cup opponents, 6-2 in kills, but it's Oxygen Supremacy with the very, very slight gold lead. And at 15 minutes, we're not usually talking about a 200 gold lead, but at this stage, when Flashpoint's composition is so early game focused, I think that's definitely a bad sign for them to be down about 300 gold right now with the Osiris, who's had a great game on that right-hand side. Oxygen's been stealing away so much on the left that Flashpoint don't have a lead. It's
incredibly important to notice that goal difference right now, because every single one of these team fights, it's always been Oxygen Supremacy on the defensive and having to ult out more defensively than aggressively. And because of that, you would imagine that Flashpoint would definitely be rolling a little bit more ahead, 2-3k goal lead possibly, but it just seems like they're unable to really pick anything up after.
Uh-oh, Xenotronics falls once more. Skeeledon has had his eyes set on the enemy hunter all game long. Number 3 on the board. All 3 deaths for Flashpoint. They are on to their hunter, Xenotronics. Flashpoint, they're going to start up this Portal Demon, but on the left side, Oxygen Supremacy just got the Gold Fury with no contention whatsoever. That's going to catapult their lead up above 2,000 gold.
I don't think Flashpoint wanted to fight there. I mean, they were already on the opposite side of the map, but they recognized that Xeno was getting ganked. Xeno's probably calling out, yeah, I'm getting Batz ulted again, guys. So in that circumstance, I think that it's a pretty smart play to just take away the Portal Demon from Oxygen Supremacy in case they decide to try and swing their way over.
Flashpoint finally heading over to this left side, but Skeeledon, he's already backing. I think Oxygen Supremacy was looking to see the response time there from Flashpoint, seeing if anyone was coming over to defend the Tier 2, and what they saw on the wards that they were coming to defend, Skeeledon and co. just kind of took what they had earned for themselves and backed to base. Right now they're up right around, right underneath 2,000 gold again.
Skeely probably clenched a little bit there as well, because you could tell that Mirage probably tried to jump in on him with that lazy back underneath the T2.
Well, Mirage on this Awilix has really been grouped up with Shadowq, has not been looking to find the 1v1 scenarios against Skeeledon. Do you think that's just part of Flashpoint's plan, or do you think it's because of the early lead Skeeledon got with that first blood?
Skeely had a great early lead, but I mean, at this point in time, they imagine that Skeely's primary focus is just going to be Xeno. Shadowq is better off just trying to help his team pressure other points of the map, because more likely than not, you're not going to be able to save an Artemis should Oxygen Supremacy decide to commit.
And that's what they've done all game long, basically. I mean, we're only 18 minutes in, but we've seen Skeeledon, NeiruMah on that left-hand side pretty much consistently throughout. Mirage trying to secure his own speed, but Skeeledon is here and steals it away once more. Skeely's having a great game so far, 2-1-1, second on the player damage charts, behind only Aquarius, who's more than doubling him, but the focus is on to the Soul Laner. So tanky, level 17, still alive, able to use that Lord of the Afterlife over the top. The Vulcan ultimate not gonna hit. Aquarius is gonna eat 3 ults and survive.
I cannot believe that he just escaped that. DayToRemeber forced to expend his beads. Shadowq in the middle of it all, but the Kraken is good.
DayToRemeber still 1 HP. Skeeledon underneath the tower. The tower shot doesn't quite clean him up. So low are the members of Oxygen Supremacy. Teleports coming in from Aquarius. He's coming back with a vengeance, and Oxygen Supremacy are on the run, trying to get away, and that mobility coming into play. Almost every character on Oxygen Supremacy has a dash or a leap of some sort. A lot of damage in that engagement, Taco, but somehow everybody survives.
Except for the blue buff of Oxygen. That's going to be stripped away again, but that's something that Kiki's probably all too familiar with at this point in time.
I love the idea there to focus down DayToRemeber, who caught himself in a bad spot after that excellent pull by Shadowq. But Incon just a little bit too eager with that Kraken. The Aegis was still available for DayToRemeber and he was not knocked up any longer. So the Aegis bought him enough time to save his life. The meditation there from NeiruMah was big as well. Got to give shout outs to the support player for Oxygen Supremacy, who has had a pretty solid game. 0-1 and 0, but that's basically what you want to see out of your support at this stage.
And that was a ton of discipline as well from DayToRemeber, holding that Aegis until the Kraken came through, because had he been a little bit too soon or too late, I mean, he would have definitely fallen, and that engagement could have been entirely different.
Look at the lead in terms of items that DayToRemeber has over Xenotronics. He has a full Aussie, basically. Just now does Xenotronics back and finish off his chin size. Do you like this chin size pickup in this matchup, or would you rather have seen Xeno go for the Executioner?
Considering that he opted for the Transcendence, it means that he's probably looking for a little bit more of a pen-oriented build, potentially even a Brawlers to try and deal with the Vamana at these later stages of the game. And I actually like the option for Chins here. He's been getting ganked pretty consistently, and they've been committing to him hardcore. So you might as well just opt for damage or sustain, because sustain isn't going to make a difference when they're ensuring that you die every time.
Do you expect to see him go for some more crit, though, towards the end? I mean, most of the time, Artemis, with that crit passive, that's the typical build path we see out of the Hunter.
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, with the passive already being in place, like you mentioned, I wouldn't put it outside of the possibility, but it's just something that you might not necessarily want with the Transcendence build.
Well, DayToRemeber has an entire Aussie over Xenotronics right now. That's basically what it comes down to. I know we've said his name a lot, but Aquarius, for his first LAN, this guy is absolutely killing it right now. He's level 18, the highest in the game, 3-0 and 3, and oh yeah, he's doubling the next highest player in player damage. 14,000 plus so far for this Osiris.
If your teammate's going to be given a lead, you just hope to God that they're going to do something with it, and that's exactly what Aquarius has done the entire game. He's consistently been in the faces of Oxygen Supremacy, making life as difficult as possible for them.
Gold Fury has respawned, and Oxygen, they got the first one of, or excuse me, the last one, and it looks like they might get this one too, getting very, very low. Xeno tries to get in there and steal it, but not able to do so. Oxygen get another Gold Fury for their name. Petrify stuns out two, and the Fear No Evil to try and get DayToRemeber out of danger. Venenu, he's the one who's in danger though, very, very low. Mirage has to jump away with 1 HP. Everyone is just getting out with 1 HP over and over again. Venenu does find Mirage with the meatball over the wall, and the cheeky back by the enemy purple buff is going to get the mid laner back to his base.
That outplay was absolutely sick. I can't believe that Venenu actually just made that happen.
So it's his first kill of the game, using that high power build that he's gone for. Kiki, by the way, gets another 1,500 gold for Oxygen Supremacy, who really look good in this game, Taco. The Challenger Cup players coming up, they're facing off against the 8th seeded Flashpoint here. This is a best of 3, it isn't a best of 1, but right now Oxygen looking like a really, really strong team.
The late game composition starting to come into play now that Oxygen Supremacy's had the ability to get some gold online for themselves, because you know what it means. Gold equals items, and items are exactly what Flashpoint do not want Oxygen acquiring, especially not on a Medusa or a Batz or a Vulcan.
Yeah, Vulcan almost has that Rod of Tahuti completed. There's a build for Venenu, we mentioned it earlier. It might have been a little greedy in terms of the power, and Aquarius certainly made him pay in the early stages of the game, but right now it's working out for the mid laner. 1, 2, and 1, just put himself on the board with his first kill onto Mirage there in that last little engagement. Flashpoint's pretty nervous about Oxygen pulling the Fire Giant here, Taco, but Oxygen seems content to continue to farm up and push their lead.
and Flashpoint just opting for the safe grouping into the mid lane. I like this idea behind them to just group roam, because at this point in time, Oxygen can really choose to try and pressure this FG, considering that they have the Vulcan turret available, and Vulcan's probably one of the best mages for killing objectives.
Kiki in a little bit of an awkward position, but he is Vamana. There's the Petrify. It hits so many members of Flashpoint. Just off the mark is Venenu with the ultimate, but Skeeledon finds Mirage on this right-hand side. Shadowq knocked up and controlled. Venenu puts on number 2. Aquarius went aggressive with his ultimate, and DayToRemeber makes him pay. Kiki finally getting gets knocked down by Xenotronics, who puts himself on the board. But I don't think it matters, Taco. That's 3 for 1, and Oxygen, they're looking at the Fire Giant.
And Incon and Xeno, neither of them had their ultimates available, which is going to make it in contesting incredibly difficult. I just don't see how they could possibly get in, and they can't.
They cannot. Oxygen secure the first Fire Giant of the game, an 8,500 gold lead in their favor. Right now, Flashpoint up against the ropes from Kiki and Skeeledon, the 2 members of Envy last season, trying to work their way back up and prove that they deserve to be in the SPL once more.
It's also incredible when you look at it, because the scoreline not too long ago was 6-2.
Yeah.
It is 7-7 now. So Flashpoint has only responded with 1 kill within the past few minutes, and Oxygen has just been on a roll.
And I love everything about Oxygen's game so far has been really, really impressive to me. Not only the fact that they've been able to battle back, but exactly how they did it. They looked at Flashpoint's composition and said, okay, we can't fight in solo because they have Osiris. We can't really fight in the jungle because they've got Awilix, Poseidon, and Shadowq. They look at the only lane they can fight in and do it consistently throughout the game. They allow Flashpoint to gain themselves a lead on that right-hand side, and they just wait it out. They wait until their composition really starts to outshine Flashpoint's, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. 7-7, like you mentioned, and every mid-game team fight has gone the way of Oxygen Supremacy.
It's so devastating for Xenotronics in particular, because he didn't even necessarily play the lane wrong. His positioning, for the most part, wasn't that out of line. It's just that the commit was too much for him to handle.
And that's, Xenotronics definitely a pretty tenured player here on LAN nowadays, but whenever he first got here for the group stages on Luminosity last season, you could tell there was a little bit of nerves there. No surprise that Oxygen tries to kind of rekindle those nerves, maybe, with the focus onto the Hunter. Tier 2 tower in mid already knocked down. You could say the same about the Tier 2 tower in left. That makes a grand total of 0 towers remaining for Flashpoint to defend their Titan with. Only those 3 Phoenixes. That gold lead for Oxygen, well, it's up and over 10,000. It's up and over 12,000 right now, and we're just at the 26-minute mark. Look at all the level 20s. Really, there's only one. It's Skeeledon, and that's a problem because Aquarius had a huge lead and wasn't able to continue to farm up. Skeely has had an unbelievable game.
Aquarius has been trying to compensate for his team by being the tanky frontliner, but now that Oxygen have those items online, he just can't really afford to stand in the face of Oxygen anymore.
Skeeledon just trying to find Aquarius and Xenotronics there in the mid lane, but the wards spot him out. Left side Phoenix is the focus here for Oxygen. But I don't know if they want to take a full 5-on-5. Most of these team fights, Taco, have been pretty split as far as where they're happening in the jungle. I think Oxygen's a little nervous if it's a 5-on-5 team fight in the lane, that their composition might not be quite as strong as Flashpoint still.
If Kiki had Fire Giant, I would expect a little bit of a commit underneath one of the Phoenix there from Oxygen, but without Kiki having the Fire Giant available, he doesn't get the same amount of regen. Sure, he's got the ultimate, but if Aquarius lands his ult onto him, I mean, we could very well see Kiki falling down, and that's the last thing you'd want to happen in these later stage game fights.
Let's take a look at the player damage again, because Kiki is very, very low on this list. He's only got 6,000 damage so far. But that's been him, like you mentioned, Xenotronics played the lane. This is what Kiki's doing on this right-hand side. He just kind of was the punching bag for Oxygen Supremacy, understanding their game plan. He just taking all the shots and saying, just win on that left side. That's exactly what Oxygen did. So a lot of people may judge that number that Kiki's thrown out there, but I think that ends up working out in Oxygen's favor.
But just take a look at Kiki's build. That's not a build that you play aggressively with on Vamana. His whole concept here is, I want to be as tanky as possible. And we saw it even before the Fire Giant was taken by Oxygen Supremacy. Kiki was single-handedly zoning 2 damage characters on the side of Flashpoint, just in the face of Incon and Xenotronics. And even though they did end up killing him, by that point in time, the rest of Flashpoint had already fallen, and that was a free Fire Giant to Oxygen because of it.
And all those level 20s that we were talking about to happen, well, they've happened. Every member on Oxygen Supremacy level 20 outside of the support player NeiruMah 0, 1, and 4. For him, who's also gone for a very tanky build. Love the communication between the solo laner and the support. Kiki says, I'm getting Heartward Amulet. NeiruMah, you can grab Sovereignty, you can grab Gauntlet of Thebes, but you don't have to worry about providing that magical aura to the team because Kiki, he's got that covered. Skeeledon blinks in and finds Shadowq with that Fear No Evil, commit onto the support, and he's dead before he hits the ground. DayToRemeber knocks him down. Incon has to Aegis out, that ultimate out of Vulcan, but Kiki just zoning away 3 members. Aquarius has got to handle the rest of Oxygen Supremacy, and that lead that he got earlier doesn't matter much now. 2 dead on the side of Flashpoint.
And yet another Fire Giant that will undoubtedly go the way of Oxygen Supremacy. I highly doubt that any of the remaining members of Flashpoint want to try and contest.
And NeiruMah's already up into this dragon form. He can give that chorus buff to everyone on his team right away as the Fire Giant respawns. It doesn't stand for long. All 5 members this time have the buff, and I don't think the Phoenixes are going to last very long.
No, considering that Aquarius is already still with 30 seconds remaining on that respawn timer, that is going to be incredibly difficult for Flashpoint to try and hold.
Shadowq does have his ultimate. He's also picked up a power potion to try and turn the tide here underneath his own Phoenix. Right side Phoenix given up by Flashpoint. We could see them defend this mid Phoenix, but Aquarius still not up for another 7 seconds. Does have a ward that he could teleport to behind the enemy, but that's pretty far away from the Phoenix defense.
And this is it. This is risky right here. If Flashpoint take even the slightest misstep, they will definitely find themselves losing the team fight.
And middle Phoenix already gone. Shadowq wants to try and find the engagement, but doesn't have that blink. He went for the shell. Incon, he's the first one in. Hits multiple with that Kraken, but not enough damage. Shadowq does get that Wrath of Terror off, but Venenu erases Xenotronics. DayToRemeber gonna find a kill as well. Skeeledon jumps in with the help of NeiruMah, knocks down Mirage. 3 dead, only Aquarius and Incon left to try and defend against this last push from Oxygen.
And I just don't see how Flashpoint are going to be able to try and hold this. They don't have any ultimates available. Everybody is dead who would have had one.
No minions, though. They don't have any minions. Do Oxygen Supremacy. Aquarius immediately diving onto DayToRemeber, but the help is good. Skeeledon puts up number 4. Oxygen Supremacy, they take the first game here at the Gauntlet. 30 minutes, 13-7 over the ace-seeded Flashpoint.
And what an initial display from Oxygen Supremacy. You can tell that this team really came out to prove themselves. Kiki 100% wants redemption and back into the SPL.
I mean, you look at these Challenger Cup teams that end up playing the bottom level SPL teams consistently through relegations or a gauntlet or whatever it may be. And a lot of times their mechanics are good, but their game plan might not be SPL level quite yet. That was absolutely SPL level game planning there from Oxygen Supremacy, understanding what their comp did, understanding what Flashpoint's comp wanted to do, and shutting down where the weak points were.
And that's the kind of veteran leadership that you'd expect from members such as Kiki and Skeeledon, who are all too familiar with that SPL Tango. And so just absolutely beautiful gameplay all around.
All really, really good stuff. But they're not done yet. They still have to win at least one more game up against Flashpoint to move on and face the 7th seed, Noble. That's what we're going to talk about here on the desk. But let's go through game 1, actually. I think that's a little bit of a better idea. Tom, take it away.
A lot of fun stuff there in that matchup, and really just an exciting match. I think Flashpoint struggled a little bit in some of the points, but I don't think this is a story about Flashpoint dropping the ball. I think this is the fact that the challengers actually came to play.
Definitely a good strategy between both teams, where we saw Flashpoint invade the solo, and then we also saw Oxygen invade that dual lane. So that was basically the theme, trying to shut down Kiki on one hand, whereas Xenotronics got shut down really hard, really early.
You say trying to shut down Kiki, but that was tougher than it sounds. I think the driver of this ship perhaps was Skeeledon, though. A lot of the ultimates coming through from that Fear No Evil was setting up his team and also creating some bad counter engagements for the opposition.
We even saw the first blood early on onto Xenotronics. He didn't have the purification beads, and a level 4 Artemis without purification beads against a Batz with Fear No Evil, there's no surviving that one.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the Hunter pick there, the Artemis. Do you think that really came in towards the end and one of the big reasons why this match went the way it did, Dimmy?
So why you pick Artemis is because you want to have a late game plan to fall back on, because they have an early game draft, and once that kind of early game trickles down, yeah, you want to have the Artemis to pull through for you.
Right.
Clearly, that doesn't really work when the Artemis is three levels behind and just under her tower. So they just lost because the dual lane side didn't have any pressure.
Well, that's what, Aggro touched on that before, where he said this is a team that, not only they're trying to fight back into the SPL and all that nice fun stuff, storyline status, but Aggro mentioned, he said, look, this is a team that understands the SPL level, and Taka says how they know how to do the dance, right? And they understood with the Artemis selection over there, that means that the attention had to be paid early on to that dual lane, shut it down. As the game got later and later, Skeeledon just kept doing it, and I think that put a smile on a lot of fans' faces. Skeeledon, he's a streamer, he's a popular member of the community, but his performances in the SPL have not really been up to par. And then here he is in the Gauntlet, really pulling out all the stops, allowing him and his teammates to find the win here in game number 1. Jungle and mid synergy, big point here in season number 4. And so Venenu on the Vulcan, very interesting third choice item for the Spear of Desolation. Expensive, but it worked out.
Especially whenever he makes plays like this. He was basically in a world of hurt here. I actually don't even know how he managed to survive this.
He should have died there.
And then he had enough confidence to still stay in this team fight, wrap around the goal here, find the meatball from a distance onto Mirage.
Doesn't even look at it, just keeps on trucking. Just keeps on trucking. Got all of that one. Again, the rookie, or the sophomore rookie season, was in the hunter role. Now in the mid lane, I mean, that's a big transition.
And you were talking about the item selection between Venenu. He went for Bancroft's talent really early on after the Pen Boots was finished, then into the Spear of Desolation. And then we saw Incon's build on the Poseidon. He was going for a more utility style right off the bat. After he finished Dynasty Plate Helmet, Pen Boots, he went for the Gem of Isolation and Fatalis. And at the 22.5 minute mark, he was actually 2,000 damage behind his opposition.
Yeah, I think he should have picked up the Spear of the Magus earlier so he can ramp up his damage against the Fafnir. The helmet is a really staple item on any god.
Yeah.
However, if he chooses to go a helmet into gem into Fatalis, he just lacked the damage and penetration. Afterwards, he decides to get a shard, which is a late game alternative, which is fine in my eyes, but then he lacks the power.
I just feel like there's so many bridge items here because he also went for the star item with the Bumba's mask.
That's
and then
true.
with the Dynasty Plate Helmet, it takes a while for him to get his items online. And then without that kind of penetration and damage items, it's just... he was struggling with the damage. We even saw Kiki doing a great job zoning. It took a long time to really lock down this Vamana in the lake because of the lack of damage coming out of Incon.
We've been talking about Skeeledon shutting down these team fights with the Hambat ult. I want to mention, though, that the Vamana being in the front lane, baiting out the initiation, and then having the Hambats follow up was just huge for them in the jungle. Yeah,
Kiki really did his role justice. And just as a longtime viewer, fan of the game, forget that I'm a commentator for a second, I'm just happy to see him back in his role of a solo lane. I mean, I'm sitting next to two solo laners, right? And this is what Kiki does. He transitioned over to the mid lane to try and help out his team, but Kiki's been playing the game for as long as some of the longest veterans has in that short lane. And getting to watch his Vamana play, just watching the way he actually executes and keeps the zoning while still maintaining control over a team fight, that's classic solo lane play. You guys have to do 3 things at once in a team fight. So I think that's what we got to see out of Kiki here in the short lane. Whereas on the other side, you had Xenotronics in the long lane. He played the Artemis, and like we said, did not exactly have his day in the sun.
Not at all. He got shut down really hard. He had 2 early deaths. He was 1 to 2 levels behind really early on. And that's something you not necessarily want to fall back behind as an Artemis player. You know, you have to rely on the protection of your teammates. But because Flashpoint was putting so much pressure in the solo lane jungle, which worked out for them, that kind of hurt Xenotronics in the long run.
So my question there is, because it's at this level of play, it's never as easy as it is the scene on the surface. Was it Xeno's play that got him in trouble with the Artemis, or was it lack of team presence or something altogether different?
I just felt like the god didn't fit the composition necessarily, because Artemis is not a safe god that you want to leave alone in the solo lane. Now, it was only Scotty banned away and Medusa picked up, so there was so many gods to pick from that table to play safe. Apollo and Rama specifically come to mind if you want to peel for yourself and run away.
Obviously, and you could also always play Neath.
Or play Neath, just throw out the ults, right?
Oh, yeah.
Neath's certainly a choice. One thing that I did like about the Artemis selection was we saw it very early on, the standard strategy where the enemy team gets lane pressure and then picks up the smaller minions next to the buff camps. He was able to secure them over the wall. So I think there was a little bit of positivity in that thought process, but what happens on paper doesn't always wind up on the battlefield.
Well, you don't draft an Artemis expecting like, okay, they're going to invade my purple buff, and I'm going to use my 3 to secure my own purple buff. No, unfortunately, that first blood definitely hurt him, though.
Excuse me, it's Vengeful Assault. Or Suppress the Insolent. Okay, not your 3. If Agrid's going to say Caledonian Boar, you've got to say Suppress the Insolent.
I'll let him say all the names that he wants. I'm just going to stick to numbers.
Right there, that's support NeiruMah. He played the Fafnir last time around. Troublesome opposition. Dimmy, you actually really were excited about the Poseidon pick into the Fafnir.
Yes, Poseidon is a great pick into the Fafnir. You have the Whirlpool right after the ult. He's going to get stuck. And then you have the Kraken to follow up. He should be dead in that Whirlpool every single time. On his play, however, I want to mention that he might have been able to peel a tiny bit more for the mid laner, the Vulcan, Venenu. We had a couple of fights where you had just the Osiris walking down the Vulcan, and I think that could have maybe been prevented by a hammer.
I'm glad.